Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts, sports journalist David Todd, and from SteelersDepot.com, Dave Bryan. Just a couple of Daves, chillin', talking Steelers. Now, here's Dave and Dave.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Dave. He's Dave Bryan at SteelersDepot.com, the place to get your latest and greatest Steelers information. And I'm David Todd at Season 9, Episode 4. Dave, we got some Friday night lights tonight up in Latrobe.
And we also had, I don't know how much you watched of it, but some preseason football last night. The Hall of Fame game, Ravens beat the Bears 17-16. The man gets me right out.
The man nicked us?
The man got me right out of the chute there. But it's going to be one of those seasons, I have a feeling. But it was good to have football back. Got to see a lot of Lamar Jackson in the second half. I don't know how much you watched of the game.
I honestly, I had to come up to New York City to do some work, and I had a dinner last night. I didn't see a play, to be honest.
I have a feeling that you're not going to stumble over yourself getting to get in the game rewind to watch it as well too. But Jackson did some interesting things with his legs or whatnot. I think the big talking point coming out of that game, and maybe we'll hit on it a little bit later in this show, is talking about the leading with the helmet and some of the enforcement and the penalties last night associated with that. But football is indeed back. The Steelers, of course, as you mentioned, Friday Night Lights, the annual Friday Night Lights practice later on tonight at Latrobe. What do they call it? Greater Latrobe Memorial High School. Is that how they officially say it, I think?
I think that's it. But, it's a big event and draws great crowds. And, look, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people have never been to Latrobe. And it's very funny because if you don't live in Latrobe, you call it Latrobe. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and all my life I drove through Latrobe and went to Latrobe. But the people in Latrobe call it Latrobe. But if you don't live there, everybody else in the world calls it Latrobe. It's funny. So they will all the folks will descend on Latrobe tonight, and it will be it'll be a fun event, and it always is. I want to bring everybody up to date on where we were. This week we've been talking about the different things we've been doing with the podcast. And first and foremost, the response has been fantastic. If you missed Monday and Wednesday's episode, we've been just talking about what's the best way for us to try to monetize the podcast without having it be burdensome for our listeners and just be, trying to keep just basically the idea of the same, making it easy for our listeners. And we've done a couple things. I shouldn't say we. Dave, who does all the heavy lifting on this thing, has done a great job of trying to figure out how the podcast should be hosted. And for our listeners, maybe it doesn't make much difference about how they hear it, but we've moved from SoundCloud to an app called Spreaker, or a destination called Spreaker. And this allows us to monetize a little bit based on the couple ads we've now put in, if you've heard, the pre-roll and the post-roll, and we will have a mid-roll ad in there that's 30 seconds. One of the ways you can really help us with that, with as small damage to your wallet or listening happiness, is if you can download the Spreaker app to whatever device you listen to the podcast on, and listen on Spreaker, the Spreaker app. That means we get revenue from you listening to the show that way and listening to the ads. So I realize there's an ad at the end that maybe a lot of you don't stick around to the very end. If you do, it helps us a little bit. Obviously, there's one at the beginning and there's one mid-roll. If you don't mind listening to kind of a minute or two of ads now, this is one way that we can do this. So if you have a choice about how to listen to the podcast going forward, if you could do it, what would be best for us would be in this order: the Spreaker app, or go to Spreaker.com and find the podcast and listen that way. Or obviously always on the homepage. If you're going to SteelersDepot.com, hopefully you're going every day. We've got so many great responses about people that is their destination of choice to get Steelers news, as it should be. Go to SteelersDepot.com. And on the embedded on the Terrible Podcast post is the podcast. So that way they get to see exactly who's listening. It helps our demographics. We get a little bit of revenue from that, and that's fantastic. I want to just make this point one more time. I can't express to those of you who took, I mean, some of these emails were, incredibly long and detailed. People probably took 20 or 30 minutes to write some of these. But for all of you who took the time to write and respond about what they thought the best way to go was, thank you so much for doing that. Dave and I really appreciate it. And Dave's comment the other day talking about, a monthly, if you signed up and signed up monthly and put it on the donate button on the page and just, made a note. I think some people had trouble making a note, but obviously we know that, the donations that were made this week were largely focused on hearing us talk about this. It's been fantastic. We got a ridiculous response from people donating $2, $3, $5, $10 a month to the show. And I can't tell you how good that makes us look. We love what we do. We love the fact that you guys are so enthusiastic about it. Just thank you very much for all of that. It means the world to me and Dave. So, and everybody associated with the site is involved in this whole thing. So appreciate all of that. We'll kind of leave that now. I know we've mentioned it each of the last 3 shows. Just wanted to get it out there for people who might not have heard, some of the shows this week. So we're done for now. Nothing's going to change except there's some ads on the site. And maybe if you can listen the way we suggested, that would be helpful. So thank you for everything. Thank you for your continued support. On to the football.
Yeah, and let me tag one quick thing on that, and then we're going to leave this alone for a while, David. For people that do want to go the donate route and donate monthly, that's a good way of kind of, instead of us using Patreon or putting anything behind the wall, for those that want to donate, obviously you can do a one-time charge if you'd like, but if you wanted to set up kind of a monthly thing of $2, $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, whatever dollars a month, that kind of gives us a better feel as if it's a subscription as well too. It's totally up to you. And another thing that David did a great job of telling you the best ways to listen to the show that helps us out. I would like for those of you who have the time and that use Twitter to tweet Spreaker at Spreaker and let them know that you're switching. You're either listening to the show via their app or listening to this show on Spreaker.com because of the terrible podcast. If we let them know, and I'm sure, let me tell you, they're going to see it already in these numbers that we're putting on their site already. But if we can kind of make a power play, if you will, and make a noticeable imprint with them with this switch over, maybe we can end up getting some better rate packages and maybe some more targeted and specific advertising as well too, and that obviously would help prevent the show from ever being put behind any kind of a paywall as well too. So as David said, we're not going to make any rash decisions here. We just kind of outline ways that you can help us help you, right, David?
Yeah. Hopefully at no cost to you, and just hopefully no inconvenience to you. All right, let's get after it. Where do you want to start, Dave?
Let us start by talking about the health of the team and I guess their main player, skill position, Antonio Brown, has not practiced the last 2 days, and Mike Tomlin said after the session on today's Friday, after Thursday's session, that Antonio Brown was sent back to Pittsburgh for some further evaluation, and after telling the media that, he was immediately asked what the issue is with him, and then he wouldn't say. He would not say upper body, lower body, anything. He would just say that it's day to day. He didn't go on like it's anything serious. There was a report about an hour after Tomlin spoke by Mike Florio and the gang at Pro Football Talk, saying that they think it's a quadriceps strain of some sort, and that Antonio is not expected to be serious. He's expected to be back at practice, in the near future. With that said, I think I would be surprised, or will be surprised, if Antonio Brown participates in the Friday Night Lights practice at Latrobe High School tonight. I might not see him probably for the rest of the weekend. I know it's killing him because this is a guy that just does not take take days off in general. But to hear Tomlin talk, just a day-to-day minor injury, nothing to speak of.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I don't understand why Mike Tomlin, 6 weeks or whatever it is, 5 weeks before the Steelers have a game, won't say he's got a quad strain. It really is kind of state secrets. I mean, what's going on? The things football coaches do sometimes seem a little bit much, but for whatever reason, didn't want to talk about it. Obviously, anytime a guy misses practice, I know everybody holds their breath and, how serious is the injury because, who was the cornerback from Miss, the second round pick, whose name?
Senquez Golson. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, there is, having watched the play where Senquez Golson, lost his second season in a non-contact, non-anything play, just kind of running down the field, and all of a sudden season's over, and essentially his career ended, is, these things happen. Guys get nicked and bumped and bruised all the time, and I imagine if this was, what I was surprised yesterday when Tucker turned his ankle in practice at 4:55, I think Alex reported it. Practice typically ends about 5:15, and so you got a couple reps left, and whatever. If you roll your ankle, that's a big deal. And, so the way it was described, and I obviously wasn't there, is, he's getting it taped up with the assumption that he's going to go back to practice. I'm like, man, it's the second week of preseason. I realize you're battling for a job. Go up and ice it and make sure you can practice, 2 days later and you're good to go. So I don't know the severity of it. Antonio Brown, if he's got a little ding, just, make sure it's 100% healthy, good to go. Don't need to come back. But it's different if you're Tucker or if you're Antonio Brown. So just the way it is. So, yeah, a fair number of bumps and bruises here as we get into week 2.
Yeah, T.J. Watt remains out with a hamstring. It's kind of been a few days for him now. Vance McDonald, we're changing his name to If Only He Could Stay Healthy McDonald, with a foot. Now he was back on the field, in plain clothes. It didn't look like he had that foot in a boot or anything like that. So I suppose that's a good sign there. Probably just going to take some time. Anytime you hear players with foot or whatnot, you automatically think Liz Frank or foot sprain, mid-foot sprain or something along those lines. And Lord knows that McDonald has had his history of bumps and bruises here. So keep your fingers crossed there. Alejandro Villanueva, sideline still, shoulder, bicep. I don't think Mike Tomlin's officially addressed what that is, but it's enough to keep him out, a couple days. I wouldn't expect to see him tonight. You already mentioned Marcus Tucker rolling an ankle. We'll have to see if he's able to go during the Friday Night Lights practice. You have Morgan Burnett and Sean Davis, hamstring and groin respectively, still trying to battle back to some sort of full participation status. Obviously, Ramon Foster and Eli Rogers remain out with knee injuries. Eli Rogers remains on PUP. We're going to talk a little bit about him more here in a minute here. But the Steelers, because of injuries to Vance McDonald and injuries to Alejandro Villanueva, in addition to Ryan Mallett getting banged up the other day during practice, out goes Ryan Mallett. Waived injured. Out goes Darnell Leslie, a guy that had been seeing some work at inside linebacker. He was waived, and in comes Bucky Hodges, a former 6th-round draft pick out of Virginia Tech, and in comes the tackle that they got, former undrafted free agent out of Kentucky, Kyle Meadows, who was most recently with the Green Bay Packers. He played a lot of right tackle in college. I don't know much about Kyle Meadows yet. I haven't had a chance to look at him. But as I was telling Alex last night, I know a lot about Bucky Hodges. And Unfortunately for Bucky, this is already his fourth NFL team. Drafted by Minnesota. Has spent some time on the Carolina Panthers practice squad last season during his rookie season. Was most recently of the New York Jets and cut loose about last month or last couple weeks here, and now the Steelers are his fourth team. Bucky Hodges, though, he has some nice athleticism to him. In fact, if you go and you look at the P-Spark ratings ahead of the 2017 draft, David, Bucky Hodges was right there, actually ahead of Evan Ingram, who we all know was drafted drafted by the Giants and had a very good, I think, rookie season with the Giants. And his Hodges P-Spark score 138.8 had him third overall behind my boy George Kittle, David Njoku, obviously of the Cleveland Browns, and then Bucky Hodges. So he has
George Kittle was on top of that list.
143 points.
Are you serious?
I tell you, man, that's why I had. I
knew he was a blocker and a physical guy, and I didn't realize he was that good an athlete. Yeah,
and at 23.9 years of age as well too. 43.0 according to 3sigmaathlete.com, who does a great job of Zach Whitman of keeping those P-Spark scores all updated and all. But yeah, it went Kittle, Njoku, Bucky Hodges, Evan Ingram, and then Gerald Everett out of the kid out of South Alabama, Jonnu Smith out of Florida International, and everybody knows O.J. Howard out of Alabama.
Are those other guys, the two guys you just mentioned, are they in the league? The two guys before O.J. Howard?
You mean Jared Everett? He is currently with the with the Rams, right?
I don't know. I don't know that name.
Yeah. He's currently with the Rams, and Jonnu Smith. I can't remember where I'm drawing a blank on Jonnu Smith all of a sudden. Titans. Yeah. He was drafted. When was he drafted? Third round out of Florida International. Still with the Tennessee Titans. And the thing is when you why I know so much about Bucky Hodges is because I did the pre-draft breakdown of him on Steelers Depot. We always have 200 profiles a year, and I like to stick with tight ends primarily when I do these things. Tight ends or edge rushers, and I did Bucky Hodges. And the thing about him is the athleticism is on display. He was split out wide quite a bit during his last season at Virginia Tech. He has a nice catch radius, but boy, the consistency with the hands is not there. The route running leaves a little less to be desired overall. Doesn't use that athleticism to his advantage on getting on top of linebackers, if you will, down the field. Now, he can split the seam at times. He does have that. There are a few combative catches on his tape, but it's not full of combative catches when it comes to him. He's just an overall an average to below average split out tight end. And when you add in the fact that he's not a good blocker at all, especially when on the line of scrimmage. He'll give you some effort in both at the end of the line of scrimmage and split out wide as a blocker on say screens and those kind of things. But overall, his blocking really takes him down a couple of notches on top of it. And I think that in his hands and his route running is why we're now talking about Bucky Hodges being on his fourth NFL team.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're talking about a guy who's, this is always the line I have. You got 90 guys in camp with 32 teams, so you got, almost 3,000 guys being accounted for, and a guy doesn't have a job. So, tells you most of what you need to know. But also, we have seen guys come into Steelers camp during the course of the time that they're at St. Vincent and actually make the team. It's not like it's never happened before, but we've or make the practice squad. So. We'll see what happens. The other day you asked me about, where are their depth issues and where's the weakness, and we probably didn't say enough about tight end, because if somebody goes down, apparently Xavier Gimble's having a good camp, and we both dreamed on Xavier Gimble 2 years ago. He's still Xavier Grimble's still on the roster. He's going to make the roster again this year, barring something unforeseen happening. But if somebody goes down in that tight end group, well, then they're a little bit shorthanded, and obviously that's why they made the moves they made.
Yeah, and I would say right now with McDonald dinged up and not practicing, Bucky Hodges automatically probably becomes your third best tight end on the roster behind Jesse James and Xavier Grimble. Now that might sound good in rankings there. I think he's all Pharaoh McKeever out of Florida International, bless his heart, but I just he's just going to be a guy, and of course Christian Scotland Williamson, their international player, the former rugby player. There's not anything there to talk about whatsoever right now. So you have a guy like Bucky Hodges, and as I was telling, look, I'm not high on Bucky Hodges. Don't get me wrong, but with him getting signed this early right now, we're a week away from the Steelers' first preseason game. He's going to get, the next, 3-4 practices to kind of work himself in. He's going to get you would think he's going to get a lot of work in the first preseason game. He has a chance to make his mark. Now, I'm not saying he's going to make the 53-man roster, because obviously if McDonald is healthy, Grimble's healthy, and Jesse James, there's no room at the end per se. But maybe he can do enough that he gets on the practice squad. One discouraging thing about Bucky Hodges, and boy, when you're going to be a backup tight end on the Pittsburgh Steelers, like I said, you better be able to block, you better be able to play some special teams, and there's really no strong showing on tape that he's going to be a special teams contributor. So, that's discouraging there. But hey, they brought him in for a reason. Mike Tomlin loves them Virginia Beach kids, right? So he knows a lot about Bucky Hodges. So sit back and we'll see what happens with him. But don't get your hopes up when it comes to Bucky Hodges.
Dave, speaking of kind of injured guys and what the ramifications, Kevin Colbert, I guess, briefly spoke about Eli Rogers, and I saw somebody write. I don't think it was on your site, maybe it was on Twitter, that it was one of the beat writers, I think, wrote that it's possible that Eli Rogers starts the regular season on the PUP list, and then the Steelers decide what to do, sometime mid-October. Is that? I thought. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I thought Eli Rogers has been running and working out. I expect him to be off the PUP list by the time the season starts. Am I off base on that?
Well, and that's why I wanted to talk about. I told you at the open. I think we should maybe talk about him again as well too. Yes, he has been. Look, all throughout the offseason, he worked at UPMC and running and all like that. I think what you need to do, and maybe the great Melanie Girl Surgeon will chime in to me on Twitter or talk to me today. Send me a DM on this. The thing that I think we need to remember with him is when he tore the ACL in his right knee. That happened in the middle of January, right? So he reportedly had surgery to repair that ACL on January 17th. So here we are. His recovery time still, and I wrote about this all yesterday, still hasn't even hit the 7-month mark. Okay, so what is a good, we've seen guys do it in like 8-9 months, right? the Adrian Petersons and some of these guys. I don't think that's the norm now. And like I said, I'm not going to pretend to be a doctor or have the knowledge that say Melanie does, but maybe she'll chime in on this. It seems like more along the lines to be on the safe side with these guys is about 10 months. Looking back on some of these things, and you remember over the years, even Kevin Colbert has says we really feel more comfortable with these guys when they reach the year mark. Well, a year would be in January, so that's obviously not feasible when it comes to him. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't think we should be surprised if Eli Rogers is not activated from active PUP by the time training camp ends. And like it or not, Dave, we're right at the halfway mark right now. So, he missed 3, 4, 5 more practices. He's not going to see any time at Latrobe. So
right, but we were at the halfway mark of the St. Vincent part of preseason, but they get another 2 weeks down there. So
right. So can he get himself off PUP and make a difference in the final 2 weeks of the preseason, or would it be smart to bring him along slower, let him move him from active PUP to reserve PUP? Oh, by the way, I got the contract info on him. It only costs a $25,000 signing bonus to get him back. So you have virtually nothing invested in him on this 1 year, $655,000 contract. Would it be smart to bring him along slow, get a good look of what you got, on the roster? Perhaps a guy like, if you're going to carry 6 wide receivers, a guy like Damon Patterson, a guy like Marcus Tucker, serving as maybe your number 6 if you decide to keep that many. Put Eli Rogers on reserve PUP at the start of the season with the eye toward bringing him back after week 6.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how this goes.
I think the big question here is recovery time, and I think when you look back at the calendar and this thing happening in middle of January, and as I have said, it hasn't even been 7 months yet. The 7-month mark will be here in 2 weeks. I mean, that's still early. I don't know the degree of the tear that he had, or if that matters or whatnot, but he obviously had surgery. We know that. And once again, maybe Melanie will shed a little bit of light on this, and maybe we can revisit this here, in another week or so when it comes to him. But I think when you back the calendar up, when you look at the roster right now, I don't think it's out of the question that he starts the season on reserve PUP.
All right, fair enough. That certainly does, give somebody, whether it is
Hunter, Tucker, Patterson.
Quadri Henderson. I don't know. I mean, where do you stand on Quadri Henderson in kind of hearing kind of how things have gone the first 10 days?
I don't.
You're not making it, right?
I mean, look, he's he better return some punts for touchdowns.
Yep, and that's what it is. And I don't even, that's what's funny about that is so much is dependent on the blocking and everything else. You have to decide if a guy. That's the question. Like, returning a punt or a kick in the preseason for a touchdown. Does that mean you're going to be? You just have to show explosiveness in the return game and show that you're a dynamic guy. Look, he did show that at Pitt. There's no question about that. And it's clear that the Steelers don't view him as a receiver. It's also clear to me, and I said this the minute he announced that he was going pro, that it was a terrible decision by him to come out early. But he came out early because he wasn't going to class, is the way, I understand it. So, we will see where it goes for him. But, yeah, I was thinking he was, of the undrafted free agents, I was thinking he was, the guy with the best opportunity. But maybe he's not.
That was your easy bake oven going off. You baked Tom Brady a birthday cake, didn't you?
Is it today? Is it really today?
You haven't seen. Where have you been this morning? It's all over social media. They have like this 12 by 12, 900-pound birthday cake in the shape of a number 12 at the Patriots training camp that they're celebrating Tom Brady's birthday today.
Fantastic.
2,000 eggs. I hope it doesn't deflate in the sun. But back to the Quadri thing here. That's why I'm on podcast and not a comedian, I guess. But back to Quadri. It's going to take something really special. Stephon Logan type of preseason for him to make it. I personally, I just don't see it there. But I mean, it does. Let's assume everybody stays healthy. Antonio, Juju, James Washington, DHB for special teams, maybe Justin Hunter. That's 5 right there. If you keep a 6, and let's say Eli Rogers opens up the regular season on reserve PUP, I mean, do you have to keep 6? Absolutely not. We've seen this team keep, really it might be more advisable to even keep 5 unless one of these other guys like Patterson or Tucker or something can really give you something on special teams. If you only keep 5 receivers, maybe you can keep that extra, that ninth offensive lineman. Maybe you can keep an extra linebacker to look at to help on special teams. It just opens up a lot of possibilities there, so there's no guarantee if indeed Eli Rogers does open a season on reserve PUP that you're going to keep 6. But it does open up potential number 6 for a guy like the names we just rattled off there.
I think it does tell you that the Steelers, when Eli Rogers is Eli Rogers has a roster spot, basically. I mean, that's what it tells me, is if he shows that he's healthy and they take him off PUP, he's obviously going on the roster.
Well, if you want to read in between the lines, sort of what Kevin Colbert said a couple of days ago on the radio interview on 93.7 The Fan, he says Eli Rogers will be on PUP until we feel he's healthy and ready to go. Well, that's a Captain Obvious statement there. Thanks, Kevin. But he goes on to say that could be at any point in this training camp, or if he doesn't make it by the end of the camp, then he'll be out the first 6 weeks. We know that, and we're fine with that, and we're comfortable with where he is and where he may be when it's all said and done. So, putting my tinfoil hat on and trying to read in between the lines here, I almost take that as saying we plan on him being on PUP and being out the first 6 weeks of the season. Of course, I'd like to read way too much into some of these things sometimes.
All right, fair enough. So we covered all the nicks and bruises in the Eli Rogers situation. Eli's gotten a lot of pub in season 9 of the Terrible Podcast. What else we got?
I think it's worth talking about this helmet rule, and I know you haven't watched the game or the kickoff rule, and it was interesting to see the new kickoff rule put into play. The guys cannot, only the kicker basically runs up to kick the ball. Everybody else has to be within 1 yard of where the ball's teed up at, and you can only have X amount of guys back within, 12, 15 yards or whatnot like that. So that made it quite interesting there. And boy, they are really enforcing this leading with the helmet rule. And I think people are going to have a bad taste in their mouth, I think, after the preseason gets done, because I think they're going to heavily enforce this to try to get their
to get people to understand, to get players to recognize it.
Right, to get the point of emphasis across here. So, I don't know. And then there was the lowering of the helmet, or what they ended up calling a defenseless receiver hit in the end zone last night as well, too. That was kind of a questionable call. This is going to make some of the preseason unbearable to watch, I think, is what I'm getting at here. Now,
how many of those calls happened last night?
I'll have to go back through. I was trying to do during the second half of the show, record the nightly podcast with Alex and all. So I would have to go back through. I don't know the numbers.
But they called it. They called it. It was called.
Right. They did call it. Now, here is the fact sheet of the use of the helmet that is up on the NFL media site, talking about the rule. As approved by NFL clubs in March, it is a foul if a player lowers his head to initiate and make contact with his helmet against an opponent, period. Contact does not have to be to an opponent's head or neck area. Lowering the head and initiating contact to an opponent's torso, hips, and lower body is also a foul.
Basically anywhere. I mean, I don't know why they bothered to identify specific body parts, because you just said it doesn't have to be the head, so it can be anywhere else. That's what they should have said.
Violations of the rule will be easier to see and officiate when they occur in open space as opposed to close line play. But this rule applies anywhere on the field at any time. Penalties for violation, loss of 15 yards of the foul is by the defense. It is also an automatic first down. The player may also be ejected, and the ejection standards are: player lowers his helmet to establish a linear body. Well, we're getting into stuff that forced me to have to leave high school early. that marijuana. Player lowers his helmet to establish a linear body posture. Once we got into this kind of stuff in math, David, I was out. Linear body posture prior to initiating and making contact with the helmet. Number 2, unobstructed path to his opponent. Number 3, contact clearly avoidable and player delivering the blow had other options. So there you go. That's a fact sheet for use of the helmet. It's going to be interesting to see how many times. I guess I could real quick lowering of the helmet penalty here.
We talked about this. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, talking about, obviously in the preseason you're looking at individuals and those types of things. The two very interesting things that are different this season that are going to be interesting to watch in the preseason. How do people line up, cover, and return kicks? I mean, that's going to be different. It's going to be different, something that we watch that's different for sure. And this rule, and how do they enforce it? So, so we talk about this in hockey during the hockey season. They say, we're going to, point of emphasis was a good term that you used. The point of emphasis, we're not going to allow people to just whack guys with their stick in the preseason and, the lead up. And then inevitably or invariably, or whatever the right term is, it progressively gets called less and less till you get, halfway through the season. And oftentimes, the point of enforcement or the point of emphasis is, gone. So we'll see. I do think, if you exaggerate things a little bit in the preseason to make it so that guys are trying, are being forced to try to do the right thing, that's a good thing. And we'll see how it goes. Look, we don't need to talk about Ryan Shazier more than we already have. But it was his tackling style his entire career. And I never understood why, somebody didn't. I mean, this was not a one-off thing. And this just could have happened any time that we watched Ryan Shazier in a Steeler uniform. And we saw many instances where, players got hurt or he got dinged up. I just never understood why, the Steeler coaches, who I think are great in terms of technically teaching technique, why that was not something that they discouraged him from doing. Don't get it. I'll never quite understand that one. And I'll never quite understand it because I asked a question 2 years before Ryan Shazier got hurt of Mike Tomlin. He didn't answer it.
All right. Yeah, well, I have a feeling we're going to be talking about that subject a little bit more the next couple of weeks here. Pro Football Focus, depending on listeners and yay or nay as far as what they like as far as the grading or don't like as far as their grading goes. Had 2 players of the Steelers ranked in their top 10 league-wide for their special teams play last season. Those 2 players were inside linebacker Tyler Matakevich and fullback Roosevelt Nix, and I was not shocked one bit to see and read that. Now, this was based off of all special teams players league-wide that registered 200 or more snaps, which that list obviously is not very long. You probably have three, maybe 4 guys at most on your team that stayed healthy enough and saw enough core action to register those kind of snaps. But with that said, Tyler Matakevich is a fantastic special teams player, as is Roosevelt Nix. Matakevich, according to the NFL, registered, 13 total tackles on special teams last season, and of course, in addition to the one block punt that came in Week 1 against the Cleveland Browns. Nix, on the other hand, was credited with 10 special teams tackles by the NFL last season. He also came close to blocking a few punts last season, if people can remember back. Now, here's something interesting here, digging down more into the not exposed PFF data on their site. According to their site grades, T.J. Watt had a nice ranking, a special teams ranking of 82.4, and cornerback Mike Hilton had a favorable rating of 74.7 on special teams. They were the team's next two highest graded special teams players behind Matakevich and Nix. Obviously, both registered way lower than 200 snaps. I think it was 122 for Watt and 128 for Hilton. Now, the question becomes, I mean, you're not going to give T.J. Watt, you're not going to expect Watt to play 120 special team snaps in his second season now, right?
No, I would not think so. I mean, when you think of who the Steelers' best special teams players are, Matakevich, Roosevelt Nix, Anthony Chickillo, the rest of the guys are a bit fungible.
Yeah, and you would hope a guy like, let's say, Keon Adams or whoever your fourth outside, fifth, maybe even fifth outside linebacker this year, kind of swallows up some of those snaps, so Watt doesn't have to play that many. Now, the funny thing about Hilton is, I think Hilton, you're still going to see him, log 120, 115 special team snaps. And the funny thing about him, at least with these safeties banged up right now in practice, he's seeing some snaps at safety here in the last couple of practices. And Mike Tomlin was asked about that after Thursday's session, saying what's the reason that's led to that and whatnot. And he says Mike Hilton's a good tackler. So nice feather in Hilton's cap here. Now, here's something else to consider when it comes to special teams this year. You might not miss Robert Golden, the safety, but you might miss Robert Golden, the special teams player, maybe. Now,
I was thinking about that when I was thinking, how much you're going to miss Arthur Moats and Robert Golden. And the interesting thing, Golden was the up back, and Golden completed, he completed 2 passes, the one last year. The up back role is an interesting role. It's like, it's a little bit like the free safety in the defense. You got to see everything, and you got to make it, if there's a pressure decision, you got to make the right decision. So it's an incredibly important spot, but it's oftentimes it's an irrelevant spot on the play if the team isn't looking to make a block or nobody gets through. So yeah, it's a good. I like the way you phrase that. I don't know how much they'll miss Robert Golden's special teams player.
Well, now here's the thing: Nat Burray, who they signed free agent from the New York Giants during the offseason, he plays that up back role as well too, and he graded out right at the same, according to PFF. His overall special teams grade was 0.1 less than Robert Golden. And Burray also played the up back position last year with the Giants, and Burray logged 259 total special team snaps last season on his way to registering a team high 10 total tackles. So that's your guy, assuming he stays healthy. Now, if something should happen to him, it's going to be interesting to see who they can maybe get to slide into that. Everybody thinks you just sit 7 yards off the line of scrimmage, and that's an easy easy position to play. But that guy calls out, sees a lot of the checks or whatnot, and a lot can go wrong if you don't have the right guy in there. Now, Fitzgerald Toussaint does have some experience back there doing that. I would assume that Fitzgerald Toussaint and Nat Burray and, I don't know, maybe a James Conner even gets some time during the preseason. That's a position that's easy to get a name and number on during the preseason when you don't have all 22, that I'm kind of fascinated with. So we'll obviously be tracking that during the preseason, but I think Nat Burry's going to have the first crack at it. Fitzgerald Toussaint would expect him to get a little bit of work at that spot as well too, but I think Nat Burry, obviously because of his play on special teams, was the guy brought in to not only replace Robert Golden as a backup, free and strong safety, but special teams up back as well.
Yeah. Okay. What do you expect? Who's are all the guys who are dinged up not going to practice tonight?
Lord, I could guess that and be right, 100% right or 50% wrong. I don't think I'll be surprised if Watt goes and if McDonald goes. I don't know. I don't have a clue about Tucker and that ankle. I
don't think we'll see Watt or McDonald or AB.
Or AB. I would think maybe, I don't know, you're going to rush Sean Davis and Burnett. They've been limited, Could we see those guys go full tonight? I suppose. I don't know. This is usually a high tempo, high intensity kind of deal, right? Friday Night Lights.
It is. It's there's and they make a lot of it, and it's not a game, but it's as close as they're going to get until they're in a stadium. So yeah, it's an opportunity to get after a bit. And Mike makes it a high energy thing. He gets jazzed up for this and gets these guys fired up. But usually discretion the better part of valor. Anybody who's kind of dinged up generally does not participate in this thing.
I think the highlight of tonight, and we'll see if Alex might have a better vantage point of it being tonight at the high school, the backs on backers, round 2 of that. I think that'll be interesting to kind of follow along with. And, I don't know if if the goal line drill is still the marquee thing, part of Friday Night Lights or not. So that will be an interesting phase as well, too. Sirius XM NFL Radio should be there. Pat Kerwin and Jim Miller. To me, that they usually have great interviews doing that run during that. I don't know if ESPN's going to be there like they have been in the past, but really, what good is it to have ESPN cameras there if they can't really show any?
They can't show the field.
They can't show anything. I've always gotten a chuckle on that. How close do you think let me ask you this, David. In today's, technology-driven era, we see a lot of fans out there videotaping stuff and all like that. How far are we away from them saying the heck with it and just releasing videotape of this? They probably don't want that out there, but I mean, there's enough of the big plays that circulate the internet. And I guess my main question is if you were part of a front office, are you sending a scout to the people that you are on your upcoming schedule, and especially your division foes, to try to film as much of training camp as possible, or is it irrelevant?
I think it's mostly irrelevant. I mean, I'm sure the Steelers didn't pay a lot of attention to the Ravens playing last night on television and seeing what's going on.
They have scouts in those games, though.
I imagine they do, and they should. But I don't think they're going to spend a lot of time breaking the film down. I mean, they'll look at tendencies, and the scout will file a report, and all information's generally good information. But this isn't going to be something that's a big part of the first matchup, Steelers-Ravens. What they did in the Hall of Fame game, not going to be a big part of the week of preparation. Let's put it that way.
Well, yeah, and obviously half those players won't be there, and you're probably not going to discern much from scheme or anything like that. One other thing that Alex and I have been talking about back and forth, how much Landry Jones do you have to see in the first 2 preseason games? We know we know we're not going to see much, if any, Ben Roethlisberger, but how much Landry Jones do you think we should see, and how much do you think we will see?
I don't know. I mean, I assume he'll start the first preseason game and get the first quarter. Maybe he starts the second one and gets the first half. But we're gonna see a lot of Josh Dobbs and Mason Rudolph for sure. But no, Landry played a lot last preseason. If you remember, he played a ton. And
you're thinking a couple years ago. He had the abdominal last year. Remember?
Oh, right, exactly. Sorry, a couple of years ago, he played like 2.5 games worth out of 4. And I would expect him to, what's Ben going to play? A quarter in game 3, maybe a half in game 3. So that's of 8 halves. There's one that so you got 7 for the other guys. I would expect Landry to play at least 4 quarters in the preseason. I don't need to see a lot, but you want him to get his reps in game situations because I'll stick to my statement is, he's going to be the backup in week 1. And if something happens, you need to have him ready to go.
Let's say 275 total preseason snaps for the offense this year. What's 275 divided by?
Probably a little higher, right? So 70 times 4 is 280. So yeah, that's fine.
All right, 275 total offensive snaps.
And Jones get half of them.
I'll take the under. I'll bet your house.
Yeah, do you think he'll play in week 4?
If he does, it won't be much. So you're saying he easily eclipsed the 100 snap mark, Landry, during the preseason?
100 to 125 is a good I think a good guess. Maybe he only gets the first. I'm guessing he gets the first quarter in the first game, and the first half in the second game, or maybe that first quarter. I'm guessing he gets 3 quarters in the first 2 games. That should put him at 60, and then we'll see from there.
All right, let's whittle it down here to the first 2 games. 135. That's let's say 140 total snaps, right? For the offense. How many snaps will Landry Jones have in that first 2 games of 140 total snaps?
So I said he'd have 60 after the first 2 games. 50 to 60.
I'll take the under.
Fair enough.
What do you need to learn about him now? To me, I want to see a lot of Joshua Dobbs and a lot of Landry Jones in these first 2 games.
A lot of Mason Rudolph.
Mason Rudolph in these first 2 games. Let Ben play the first quarter and a half in preseason game number 3. Let Landry play the end of the second quarter on into the second half until you've seen enough there, and then maybe let Landry Jones play the opening 2 series in the finale and call it a day. I think that's the way they should go. So little side action there, if you will, meaningless side action.
Fair enough. All good.
Okay, and I think that'll be a wrap on things. We'll get back after it again on Monday. Hopefully, we're not talking about any more injuries. Alex and I will recap the Friday Night Lights practice during a Saturday night podcast after Saturday's practice. Alex, of course, will be getting home from Latrobe a lot later this evening. Give him time to file his report and get him some of that well-rested, well-needed young beauty sleep that he needs. I and David, of course, do not require that. Well, David does require that kind of sleep. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow David Todd on Twitter at David M. Todd. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. David, we know people know what that email address is, don't we? They can go to SteelersDepot.com, hit that donate button as well. And please follow our advice as far as the Spreaker apps and all goes. And we appreciate, once again, all the feedback that we have gotten. And David, have a nice weekend there in New York City.
The hot apple. As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Dave.